This video will discuss some very heavy topics, including depression, suicide, and self-harm. Viewer discretion is advised. On a quiet evening in 2021, I stumbled across a game on Steam with a gray, unexciting icon and a handful of absolutely glowing reviews. The description was short. A game about boredom and self-pity. It's about myself, mostly. You walk around and press the interact button. Sorry for making this. I installed it, clicked play, and over the next 5 hours found myself unable to look away from my screen. The characters spoke to each other, but they might as well have been speaking to me. I laughed, I cried, I stared at the screen with my hand shaking over the X button, taking a deep breath before I kept going. And then it ended. The screen went black and I was still staring. I wasn't sure how to process how I felt. But I knew that what I had experienced would stay with me for the rest of my life. That was my first encounter with a teeny tiny little indie game known as Life Tastes Like Cardboard, a game released in 2019 by solo developer Demensa, the only game created by Demensa, a game about depression, self-loathing, and the struggle for human connection, and one of the most moving pieces of artwork that I have ever experienced. This game is very dialogue heavy. In this section I'm going to go over the story with certain scenes included unabridged, but the whole game is fantastically made and also free, and I won't be covering every detail, so I highly suggest that you take the time to play it yourself for the full experience. But be aware if you do, it's a very, very emotionally intense game. Anyway. Life Tastes Like Cardboard begins like this. As we interact with the room, we glimpse into who we're playing as. He makes detailed plans for small things, what to eat, how much he has left, exactly how much time to get to the bus. He leaves the apartment and walks down the street, hops on the bus, goes to class, comes home, goes to bed. People around him are shadows. He speaks to no one. The next morning, he leaves his apartment and walks down the street, hops on the bus, goes to class, comes home, goes to bed. Over and over. Alarm, bus, class, sleep. The cycle repeats again and again. Reality starts to blur. Environments bleed into each other. Time seems to lose its meaning. Places become endless mazes of repeated patterns, events melding together as our protagonist wanders aimless. Alarm, bus, class, sleep. He leaves his apartment. The screen fades back in, and we visit Rem, a cardboard cutout our protagonist talks with between chapters. Here we can choose to discuss any item that seems familiar he's picked up in a previous chapter. We fade into a field and are introduced to a charming fox fellow. For now, he's just a stranger. The two discuss a man who seems to have been running in a circle for years on end, and the potential metaphor of the man representing our protagonist running away from the harsh reality of everyday life. Or maybe it's simply a man running. They did make a TV movie about him, though. The fox tells our protagonist his name, Ollie. Our protagonist returns the favor. John. John walks across the field into a video store that morphs into a bowling alley, only to find Ollie behind the counter. Ollie doesn't work there. The air hockey table is just missing a mallet, and again they discuss the potential metaphor. Perhaps it's about how things don't always work out, or perhaps memories as being inferior to reality. From here, it's onto a long corridor filled with columns that span upwards beyond the screen, infinitely into the background. And at the end of the cavernous tunnel lies... They go on to discuss the architecture, if perhaps the columns are load-bearing or simply decorative. After a bit, they part ways with a "I'll see you around" and a soft smile. A pixelated John appears before the Moo Art ZU. Yay. There's a lot to look at here. Comedic pieces, personal pieces, dark pieces, orange juice in a can. One could easily spend half an hour browsing it all. However, there's only one piece in the museum that seems to attract any attention. Slaves of the modern era.
Now that's what I call art.
Now that's what I call art.
Yeah, oh no, it's not that.
Now that's what I call art. As John continues through the museum and into a narrow corridor, he suddenly finds himself behind a glass wall. He turns around. The music begins to swell in an infinitely rising tone. He's trapped. Nightmarish patrons begin to wander towards him, gawking at him in silence as he stumbles back and forth in hopes that an exit will appear. The stressful tone rising until... Model of no one in particular. John enters the far room, transported to a black void. All he can do is float, the stars repeating in an endless loop before... He falls. He rebuilds himself and continues walking until he encounters a door. We awake to a rainy field, glowing blue symbols shimmering in the distance. Each symbol is a memory. The field is vast, filled with spontaneous thoughts and remembrances, each one unique. Hannah was there. Very cool. Had a huge collection of fantasy, primarily, and sci-fi books in her room. She gave me a book as some sort of gift party favor, and I thanked her profusely. There's only a certain amount of horribleness that people can endure. Talking with Kanye West, eating pickles, Burj Dubai, looking for a job. In the middle of the field is a house, also filled with memories, though these seem to fade before John can touch them. Inside this house is a house. Inside that house, another. John shrinks down further and further the deeper he goes until he enters a store. Through the store, we enter a school. The music is uncanny. The teacher repeatedly states, "Nothing is wrong. Just do this." The corridor outside wavers and shifts, and as John walks past the rows of lockers, once again, Ollie is there. John begins to spout nonsense, expressing that he's late for a dental appointment. Ollie begins to pressure him for details, and John realizes he's probably dreaming. And Ollie's just sort of there. You know, dream chillin'. The two talk about dreams. Teeth falling out, being late for something, unable to get somewhere. The conversation moves into high school, of good memories, stress, skipping classes, and having teachers that didn't really care. Their conversation goes on for quite a while. up until Ollie points out that they're going to be late for class. As we enter the classroom, it's time for fucking orange juice, baby. Let's go! After ripping the fucking shit out of the orange juice for coming in a can and setting a negative association as an implicit starting point for their judgment of the orange juice, Ollie gets kicked out for talking. John transforms into an octopus, and we load into a text adventure with a plethora of options. Stand up, dance, go to bathroom, among many others. The options are in-depth, each item in each room examinable. You can turn off the lights, you can open the window, you can go outside. As you begin to click around, you realize none of them do anything. They make words appear, but nothing happens. You remain in your room, unable to do anything other than think about things you could be doing. The music gets loud and frantic as you click on some of the more desperate options, shaking and screaming and closing your eyes over and over and over. Someone knocks at the door. You remain in the room. You click without thought, hoping that one of these options will make you do anything. You shower. You stare at the cleaning supplies. You look at yourself in the mirror until you don't recognize your own face. You stand up. You sit down. You curl up on the floor. This chapter brings back bad memories. We fade into Rem's office, only it's misshapen, wrong. John sits down in the chair and speaks nonsense, his words misspelled, his sentences confusing. From here, he wanders into a library and the alarms blare as he enters. A man asks him to leave. He is making too much noise. It's just the rules. The library shifts into a street peppered with strangers. The music becomes a cascade of metallic sounds and droning synths as we travel along the road to a hospital. The entire screen becomes pixelated, a creeping darkness encroaching on John as he approaches the patients within. At the rightmost side of the hospital lies... Oh, fuck, dude, is that a ball pit? Hell yeah! We travel up the stairs to find... Ball pit, too?! Sorry. John traverses through the hospital, the people around him sick and broken. The ambience drones, a constant ringing in our ears. An old man dies as we watch crumbling to the floor in silence. John continues on deeper into its halls. At the end is Ollie. He sits staring wide-eyed at the wall. For the first time, the art style is soft, crayon. It's a world filled with upbeat music, smiling flowers, and happy little trees. It's Ollie's world. The two walk along the orange juice river and discuss philosophy. They talk of their favorite drinks, enjoy the passing trash parade. The music slows to a gentle, soft ambience. The sun sets quietly as they sit on a hill and continue their conversation. Dream jobs, favorite flavors, camping, board games. The conversation winds and wanders through topics as they simply enjoy each other's company. Ollie sits on a rock nearby, watching a man play the piano. The man is in anguish. He doesn't know how to write songs anymore. Ollie simply hopes the man is having a good time. John continues on, reaching a neighborhood. The music is nostalgic, but corrupted, muffled and pained. We explore the empty houses, remnants of occupancy littering the homes, but no people are ever seen. John enters a portal that flips the perspective, revealing the other side of the homes. They loom over him with terrifying smiles previously hidden by their mundane front faces. He climbs down into a cellar, only to emerge on an island. A boat lies on the shore. The mass of water is vast. As many times before, it feels unending. The sound of the waves wash over you, the world silent. Eventually, John reaches another shore, one with a single tower. John climbs the stairs floor by floor, and as you reach the rooftop, the soundtrack crashes back in with full force. It's abrasive, loud, chaotic. The skyline melds and shifts as John walks to the edge of the As the next scene fades in, we're playing as Ollie. The art style has shifted, now drawn on pen and paper. It's still scratchy, but it's cleaner than John's. The control scheme has also shifted. We now use WASD to move and interact with the mouse. Ollie walks to the end of the hallway, to John's door. John barely seems to remember what he was doing, but he invites Ollie in. He apologizes for the mess, but Ollie admits that his mother was a hoarder and he's seen worse. And, okay, this section destroys me emotionally. Among other things in the room, we can interact with John's PC, and it's a real desktop with real files, real music. We see photos of their home, their cat, old projects they worked on and abandoned, storybooks that they wrote. There are works in progress for the very game we're playing now, notes on how they wanted to portray the story and the characters. This is not only John, this is Demensa. And in the other room, a journal filled with what appear to be genuine real entries from Demensa's own diary. And there are so many of them. I think it took me 10 minutes or more to scroll through them all. This moment, without any spectacle, cements the context that John is a real human being. It's one of the most quiet, emotional gut punches that this game pulls. It takes any line that there may have been about a separation between Demenza, the artist, and John, the character, and simply erases it. There's so much to see in this section alone. One could easily spend an hour or more browsing every little detail and reading the accompanying conversations between Ollie and John. And the Word documents and the paint programs, they work. You can actually draw stuff in them. You can actually write and save files. Okay. As you approach the door, John asks if you want to stay. Of course you do. But there's only so much dialogue. Eventually, Ollie has to leave. Okay, at this point, I'm gonna pause real quick. If this has piqued your interest and you're curious to play this game yourself, do that. It's free on Steam, because past here, I'm going to spoil the ending. And if that's something you'd rather play through yourself, then please take the time to do so. Okay, back to the depressed bee guy. The screen zooms out. John is walking through a dreary, rainy street. In the distance, you see Ollie. At this point, I found myself smiling whenever I saw him. They begin to walk together until they reach a tall building, a library, one that nobody is allowed in. It only seems to house maybe 3 books. John pulls one off the shelf. The Quiet Kitten. Fuck, man. Just play the next scene. Ollie once again invites John into his world, and it's beautiful. The soft breeze causes the light to shimmer across the grass, a black sun setting in the distance. Ollie brings John to his home, and it's colorful, clean, cozy. The music is ambient and gentle. The two banter playfully as Ollie makes hot chocolate in the background. They discuss Olive Garden olfactory artwork. They joke about spices, and John admits he doesn't really know how to cook. Ollie simply offers to teach him. The cocoa finished, they sit down at the table, their discussion weaving through a multitude of topics. The entire conversation, there is an air of comfort and yet unease. The soundtrack rumbles softly. Ollie talks about all the things he's done, the things he enjoys, and John listens. He shares his own stories, but a lot of the things he's done happened long ago. As the conversation slows, John thanks Ollie for the drink, for bringing him over, and I'll just show you. John enters a void. His world is empty, wandering about in the silence until he stumbles across an arcade. Inside lies a sad, silent birthday party and several arcade machines, with one hidden far away in the back. Thoughts, fears, confessions scroll across the screen, our avatar falling into a pit over and over, the pit filling with each body. Many of these are more relatable than I should be comfortable admitting. The pit fills slowly, agonizingly. The thoughts get darker and darker, thoughts of derealization, self-harm, guilt, of ending it all. And then John crosses the pit, back to Rem. John finds himself in a forest. The game has been unplugged. He stumbles his way to the nearest door and we enter a quiet moment, the music mellow and gentle, a cave filled to the brim with orange juice cans. Ollie sits quietly atop them. Once again, the two discuss metaphors, that perhaps this all represents a dream, being divorced from the harsh reality of everyday life, a refusal to admit that nobody wants what you're offering, and all you're left with is a pile of useless junk. But Ollie begins to turn the metaphor around, pushing John to see the positives, that perhaps this is a stockpile that represents foresight for the future. The metaphor gets like 4 layers deep, but the end takeaway is perhaps John lives too far in the future, stressing and planning for every little thing, and he's missing out on the sheer excitement of living in the now. The moment of peace has ended. John's world begins to collapse in on itself, the screen shaking, the music blaring in chaotic electronic screams. As John walks, Rem berates him, blaming him for everything, for the death of his parents, for wasting his life away when he's not even sick. Ollie sits in a chair, slumped, melting across from John. "I miss you." John does not respond. The path becomes violent, distorted, and difficult to navigate until we slowly fade back into John, standing in the office. Rem is nowhere to be seen. John touches the door and the borders of the room fall to the floor. As John walks out into the void, he slumps down. Ollie walks on screen. And sits down beside him. After a moment, he gently takes John's hand. That was a lot. Take a break if you have to here before we get into the analysis. Maybe get yourself some water. Okay. Life Tastes Like Cardboard is a game shrouded narratively and artistically in metaphors. Metaphors that John and Ollie discuss openly, questioning the meaning of the memories and the fears that manifest themselves within John's surroundings. The game, through its dialogue, almost begs you as a player to ask these same questions. What does this mean to you? I can only tell you what it meant to me. I am not a therapist or a psychologist. There are subjects that this game touches on that I don't know if I'm capable of doing proper justice. I am simply somebody this game connected with, so forgive me if this part is crude. Life Tastes Like Cardboard is a game, most simply, about depression. Right from the beginning, we learn that John is isolated. He goes to class, but speaks to no one. He returns home and performs the same tasks, the same cycles, over and over. When a stranger knocks on his door, he freezes. He does not answer. As we play, we learn that John's life has not been easy. He carries with him an immense sense of loss. He lost both his mother and his sister, each of them taking their own life, a trauma among many others that he blames himself for. As he grew older, he didn't seem to grow passionate about things the way other people did, finding it difficult to relate to the things others found important. His mind, his dreams, are full of endless empty spaces, mazes of memories. In them, he's small, insignificant compared to the vast landscapes that surround him, a mirror for how he sees his own existence. As his life and his dreams blend, he begins to derealize, questioning if he even exists at all. John loathes himself. He has constant anxieties regarding what other people think of him. He overanalyzes situations, thinking of the worst possible outcomes, pushing him to simply do nothing. He finds it difficult to bring himself to create, to leave his apartment, to do something with his life that isn't nothing. He feels as though everyone else is moving forward and he's just stagnating, wasting away in his bed. These anxieties compound as a cruel, hateful voice in his mind, one that tells him he's useless, that everyone around him thinks he's nothing more than a burden, that everything wrong in his life is his own fault, one that pushes him to feel a constant guilt for even existing at all. He sees no end, except, well, maybe one. Most tragically, John thinks frequently about taking his own life, that if he did, people would clap and cheer because he perceives himself as useless, as a net negative for the world itself, because in his mind, he simply doesn't matter. However, there is another, more hopeful theme beneath all this, the one I want to touch on the most. Empathy and connection. The desire to have your voice heard, and the willingness to let people in. We see this desire in John's one-sided conversations with Rem, speaking his feelings only to be met with a cold silence. We see it in ourselves, our willingness as an audience to engage, to wander with John through the mazes of hardship and self-loathing, to hear Demensa's story. John is presented to us as a nobody, a blank gray slate of a person, and yet as we play, we learn who he is. He enjoys math, composes music, creates artwork. He has his own opinions on films and psychological concepts, vivid memories of the traumatic, the mundane, and the comforting. He feels real. He is real. He is Demensa. In presenting John, presenting themselves this way, Demensa creates a relatable tragedy. They are talented, creative, smart, but they can't see it. But this, to me, is where Ollie comes in. Ollie's presence in Life Tastes Like Cardboard is that of a soft blanket on a stormy night. Whereas Rem is cold and clinical, Ollie and his conversations with John are warm, inviting. Ollie, like the audience, sees beyond John's self-image. He grows to care for John for who he is, for the things John cannot see in himself. Repeatedly, we see Ollie take John's nightmares, his darkest thoughts, and help shift them into something lighthearted, or simply pull John out of these dark places entirely. During the chapter with the boat and the tower, John is lost in thought. He envisions being at sea, forgotten. He imagines a tower climbing to its peak, standing at the edge, and he stops when Ollie knocks on his door. He is pulled from that dark place. Unlike the text adventure, he answers the door. He allows Ollie in. In The Quiet Kitten, the book ends with Timmy calling out desperately for love, eviscerating themselves and being met with silence. This book lies in the darkest recesses of John's mind. The book was never about Timmy. But John is not met with silence like Timmy was. Ollie reaches out and takes him somewhere safe, somewhere comforting. There are a lot of theories as to what Ollie represents. To me, the answer is the simplest. Ollie is someone who became John's friend. Someone I sincerely hope became Demensa's friend. A friend John began to see in his dreams, his conversations with them as everything else bleeding into metaphor, somewhere between dreams and reality. In the one section where we play as Ollie, the art style, the control scheme, takes a complete shift. Everything else we see, read, and hear is filtered through John and his mind. But this moment, as Ollie, is not. And beautifully, Ollie is not perfect. His family life is flawed. He has his own struggles. Ollie's thoughts, his feelings, his dialogue are just as human as John's. He understands what it is to be ignored, unseen. His art style, his music is cleaner but still scratchy. His world is colorful but full of strange creatures and garbage parades. He is a gentle reflection, another difficult life. And yet, he cares. To him, John matters. The final act of this game, I think, really starts when John is pulled out of his dark library, after he shares the Quiet Kitten with Ollie. When John breaks down sobbing at Ollie's house, he reveals to him his most honest, most painful emotions, his self-loathing, his guilt, that he doesn't feel like he exists. And Ollie listens. He doesn't judge, he doesn't laugh, he doesn't tell John he's a failure. He thanks John for his honesty, for being brave enough to tell him how he feels. And as things calm down, Ollie invites John to stay a little while longer. At this moment, John understands. Ollie has heard him, seen him, cares for him. From his lowest emotional state, he is elevated to his highest. When he next sees Rem, they no longer tell him they are good at listening. They never were. John's mind is blank. He becomes lost in his memories. An arcade, a birthday cake left on the floor, something meaningful and yet forgotten, ignored. There's an emptiness inside of John. He doesn't know how to feel anymore. Is he, or is he not, worthless? He fills his mind with self-loathing, with his darkest thoughts. He reaffirms his hatred of himself. He falls into a deep depression once more. Rem is no longer silent. Rem is vicious, violent. It tells John he has no problems, he has no depression, there's nothing wrong with him, and he should feel like a waste for thinking that there is. Ollie speaks to John again. He kindly affirms, "You're not a failure. You're just thinking too far ahead." Ollie offers a counter to Rem, a more positive, balanced outlook. But this moment of peace doesn't last. It never does. John's depression tears at him. He falls deeper than we've ever seen him. We don't know how much time passes. Days, months, maybe years. Rem tears his mind at the seams for daring to think he was anything more than nothing, for thinking he's actually sick, actually depressed, for wasting year after year of his life. It's John's fault. It's only ever been his fault. He's worthless, useless, a waste of For the first time, we see Ollie ragged and worn like John. He sits in Rem's chair, the weight of his words breaking through to John. To him, Ollie matters. John apologizes for disappearing, for abandoning the only person who ever cared. He doesn't expect to be forgiven. The mental box he's been trapped in breaks as the message sends. The voice in his head quiets. Rem is silent, for now. John walks back out into the void of his mind and falls to the floor. As John sits in the darkness, Ollie takes a seat beside him. He takes him by the hand. The depression is not cured. Rem will come back. But there is a beautiful juxtaposition between the two title drops. In both, John slumps to the floor, overwhelmed. At the beginning, he is alone. And at the end, despite his depression, despite feeling broken, despite the relapse and the intensity of the fall, Ollie is holding his hand. And maybe things will be okay. I actually started tearing up reading that part. Sorry. Life Tastes Like Cardboard is a work that connects with me so deeply that I cried after my first playthrough. I cried after my second and my third. It is an experience unlike anything I have ever played and probably ever will. In every aspect, it is unique, abrasive, and beautiful. A dive into the mind of its creator and their deepest, most unfiltered emotions, emboldened with artistic direction, writing, and music that serves to empower its emotional impact tenfold. It is a game that made me laugh, made me cry into my hands at my desk, that dug up old traumas long buried and forced me to face them. It made me think about how I became who I am today and the people in my life that helped me get there. Even as I write this essay, I find myself struggling to put its impact on me into words. It is something I will think back to for the rest of my life. Life Tastes Like Cardboard is a game about dementia, about their struggle with depression and all the ugliness that comes with it. How it can tear away at us from the inside, how it can make being loved seem like something we don't deserve. And yet, it is about being heard, about empathy and connection, how the love and support of those we let in can slowly begin to change our lives. It's about the harsh reality of everyday life, and the fact that we don't have to face it alone. Please don't take this video as me saying love and friendship will 100% cure depression. I am not saying that. I'm saying that the willingness to let people in and the willingness of others to listen, empathize, and provide support can help those with depression towards healing. But if you feel like you need professional help, seek it out. Lastly, it's been 5 years since the game was released. 5 years is a long time. So I reached out to Demensa, and with their permission to include this, asked one question. Are you still sorry you made life taste like cardboard? I think, overall, I'm less sorry these days, after seeing such a positive reaction to Life Tastes Like Cardboard. And it's kind of funny to imagine being truly sorry in the first place, considering how much effort went into making it. On the flip side, I still feel apologetic for even existing, so in that sense I also feel apologetic for the game existing. There are a lot of very ugly parts of myself in Life Tastes Like Cardboard, and I cringe at the game for slightly different reasons now than I did at the time of release. And from a technical standpoint, I'm sorry that it's very buggy and for my refusal to support it, but that's a slightly different question than the one you asked. Thankfully, Demensa is doing somewhat better these days, but depression still persists. They put out a new album this year, and you can find the link to both Life Tastes Like Cardboard and their new album down in the description. And again, Demensa, thank you for calling out to the void that is the internet, for putting this beautiful work out there. I'm glad you were brave enough to tell us how you were feeling.